Hello, and welcome to my new audio series titled The Disruptive Data Architect. My name is Robert Vane. I'm a practicing enterprise architect with a particular specialism in data. This 10-chapter audio series will share with you the real-life research and the principles and approaches that I have discovered enables enterprise data architecture to make a positive difference. But firstly, by disruptive, I don't mean damaging or acting unilaterally or inappropriately. It's more about challenging the status quo and not accepting that data is too big a problem to solve. It can be solved with the right people, the right mindset, the right approaches, the right tools, and some consistent and dedicated time and effort. So let's start off with the research. Chapter 1. Some fundamental facts about data. Experts in the data industry often openly discuss questions like, what would a data-driven enterprise really look like? How would the enterprise be structured differently? Would a data-driven enterprise be better than what we currently have? Answers to these questions will become more clear as I explore the different facets of enterprise data architecture with you through this free 10-chapter audio series. However, my answer is based on some real-life research, and this research has revealed to me some true fundamental facts about data, facts that have compelled me to spread the message that the world of data, even in the largest of enterprises, just seems to be unmanageable but really isn't. So fact 1, data is more common than you might realise. My research has shown that when you deconstruct the data landscape of an enterprise into its building blocks, the number of those atomic building blocks is minute when compared to the total size of the data landscape. For example, a recent deep dive study of the retail business of a large energy company revealed over 20 databases containing over 200,000 individual database columns. Truly staggering numbers. However, when I analysed the structure and content of these databases, I identified less than 1,000 distinct atomic data units. That is, data columns that can be logically defined as the same thing. There were fewer than 40 data subject areas. That's logical entity models of data closely related by their usage. And there were less than 50 data keys, or shortcodes, commonly used to identify or join those data subject areas together. So in total, this is just over 1,000 things to manage across the whole energy retail business. So you may be asking, why can this be true? Well, you probably already know the answer. Those 1,000 or so atomic building blocks were repeated many times, both across and within those 20 or so databases. The average number of occurrences was an amazing 572. The maximum, an unbelievable 2,423 occurrences, and growing. These statistics don't even include offline access databases and spreadsheets. So, anyway, I analysed further to spot common patterns across the many database tables. I identified 30 common combinations of atomic data and key definitions across these databases. Some of these identical combinations were found in over 100 locations. So then I calculated that these 30 common patterns covered over 25% of the total data estate, and in some individual databases over 60%. So I dug even deeper and recursively looked for common patterns within those 30 initial common patterns. And I found another 20 common sub-patterns repeated more than 3 times across those 30. This is not an unusual set of findings. Many enterprises have grown organically, and they are managing their mission-critical data across many databases. So what this does reveal is the opportunity. Just think for a moment how much better things would be if the data in those 25% common patterns were only stored once, not over 500 times. But first, Fact 2. Different industries share more data building blocks than you might think. So, as I deconstructed the database landscape of this real-life enterprise, I was careful to categorize and arrange each unique building block I found in one of the following 3 ways. Category 1. Building blocks that are globally found across all industries. Then Category 2. Building blocks common to an individual industry or a related grouping of industries. Then Category 3. Building blocks that are specific to this particular enterprise. The results of this research showed that 70% of the building blocks were global. For example, data and models that describe people's names, postal addresses, email addresses, those kind of things. So how does the remaining 30 break down? Well, 28% were in the second category. They were common to an industry or a group of related industries. This leaves only 2% specific to this enterprise. So what are the reasons behind this low percentage of enterprise-specific data building blocks? Fact 3. Enabling data is a big percentage of the total data landscape. So what do I mean by enabling data? This is data with the sole purpose of running the internal mechanics of an application or bespoke system. You may ask, why should I even need to consider such data in my research? Well, this is a valid question. My answer to this is fourfold. In part 1, applications and systems provide vital enabling capabilities. For example, version control, audit, roles, entitlement, process and workflow management. These capabilities are embedded in those database silos. Some silos provide more capabilities than others. Some are more flexible or robust than others. But all of these capabilities form a critical part of the end user experience. And because I'm an enterprise data architect, and obviously a disruptive one, I take the view that because these capabilities are found everywhere, to a greater or lesser extent, they can be consolidated into a single set of enabling data structures and services, so they are therefore open to analysis and the full scrutiny of enterprise data architecture. Part 2. Some generic enabling tools such as business process management frameworks, SOA, model deployed architecture platforms, when they're used in their true spirit, or in other words, not as ways to support application integration spaghetti, are valuable platforms that enable high levels of reuse across the enterprise. But these platforms all need enabling data underneath them. So knowing where this enabling data can be found across the whole enterprise provides a baseline landscape for such tools to create a more seamless capability experience. In part 3, I've seen so many transformation programs raise business requirements that test the boundaries of enabling capabilities. Business requirements like this bit of data can only be seen or changed by somebody, but the application shows everybody everything. Or this data needs to be audited, but the application has no inbuilt auditing mechanisms. Just a couple of examples here. This list is normally long and they emerge all the time. For me, this goes to show that this data and how it is structured into capabilities is important and should not be overlooked. And finally, part 4. Well, why shouldn't I? This data forms a large percentage of the total data landscape, so it must be important, right? Some well-known application frameworks can be made up of over 60% of this kind of data, repeated hundreds of times. My research has shown this. This is fact. Fact 4. Many businesses need data for the same basic business activities. So on to business data. Many enterprises need the same common data because they basically do the same activities. Activities like selling products, services, skills and knowledge, managing customers, manufacturing and marketing products. Obviously, they arrange themselves differently, structurally, in different ways, but those basic activities can be found across many industries, and the data that supports these activities is mostly the same. Fact 5. Information security is a big risk to the enterprise. You've probably heard the phrase that goes something like, the bigger you are, the harder you fall. Well, when my research focused on data security classification, the level of risk that enterprises can be operating in, it became very clear. Even if the first 4 facts don't make a compelling case for action, this item of research on its own points out why the security principles of enterprise data architecture should be taken very seriously. The financial and reputational penalties of getting data security wrong or underestimating its significance can be extremely damaging and potentially fatal to an enterprise. Ignorance, unfortunately, is not a defence in most data protection legislation. So the 3 consistent patterns that emerged out of this research were: pattern 1. When looking just at individual atomic data building blocks across the entire data landscape, around 15% were found to be confidential, and a further 3% were highly confidential or personally sensitive. So that's nearly 20% of the total data landscape that should, by law or legislation, be subjected to additional access controls and possibly encryption. Pattern 2. When I then applied conditional rules, that's when data that would not normally be classified as confidential in its own right becomes confidential when combined with other specific items of data within the same database table. These percentages increased to 20% confidential and 5% highly confidential. So now that's 25%, a quarter of the data landscape falling under legislative control. Pattern 3. So then I researched if this data was concentrated in specific locations. In an ideal world, you think that it would be. But this was not what I found to be true. Due to the nature of most application silos, this 25% of data had been copied pretty much everywhere, and the percentage split of confidential and highly confidential data only changed by a couple of percentage points between databases. So, back to the risk. If access controls and encryption are not applied with full vigour to this 25% of data, applied in all the places that this data is stored and every time that data is moved, whether internal or external to the enterprise, a successful malicious attack to any of these databases would result in confidential data loss. This is not a position that any enterprise should really want to find itself in, right? Okay, so roundup of chapter 1. I've shared with you some of the key results of my deep dive research into the database landscape of a large retail real-life enterprise. I've shown how a small number of atomic data building blocks that define the complete data landscape are repeated hundreds and hundreds of times around that landscape. I have shown that most of those atomic data building blocks are not specific to this enterprise I studied. I've revealed just how much data is actually there to run the applications and not the business, and how much of the business data drives common activities across most enterprises. And finally, I've shown you how much confidential data was found and the level of real risk that enterprises run by copying confidential data everywhere. Well, I hope this has been food for thought. Through the next chapters of this audio series, I will describe in more detail my approach to enterprise data architecture, the approach of a disruptive data architect. So look out for chapter 2, titled "Every Journey Has a Beginning and an End." Goodbye for now.